Stop throwing money down the drain, literally. Most people waste cash in the kitchen without even realizing it. But what if I told you that a few forgotten tricks could stretch your groceries and your budget? Get ready, because these cooking hacks will save you serious money. Homemade broth is one of those unsung heroes in the kitchen. While store-bought versions often come with a hefty price tag, creating your own from vegetable, chicken, or beef scraps is not only cheaper, it's also far more flavorful. The beauty of making broth is that you're using leftovers that would otherwise go to waste. Onion skins, carrot ends, and celery stalks, these seemingly insignificant scraps can be transformed into a rich, savory liquid that can elevate any dish. It's a perfect example of maximizing ingredients in ways most of us forget. Once you've made that broth, don't toss it out after a single use. Freezing it in ice cube trays or resealable bags ensures you'll have a homemade, preservative-free option on hand whenever you need it. So the next time you're about to throw away those chicken bones or wilted vegetables, stop and think. These could be the base for your next big dish. And let's not forget about the homemade condiments. Instead of spending money on expensive, sugar-laden versions, why not whip up your own ketchup or mustard? It's a small investment of time, and you'll be amazed at how much better it tastes. Carrot tops, onion skins, and potato peels. Most of these end up in the trash without a second thought. But in the right hands, they're not waste. They're the secret to deeper flavors, richer broths, and even homemade spice blends. Every time you throw away a vegetable scrap, you're discarding a chance to get more out of what you've already paid for. It's a small shift in thinking, but one that makes a real difference in both your grocery bill and your cooking. Take soup, for example. Many classic recipes rely on store-bought broth, but you don't need to reach for the carton. By freezing vegetable scraps throughout the week, you'll always have the base for a homemade stock. No preservatives, no unnecessary sodium, just pure, slow-cooked flavor. And if you think peels have no purpose outside the compost bin, consider this. Dried onion skins can be ground into a seasoning powder, and potato peels crisp up beautifully in the oven for an easy, zero-waste snack. Speaking of saving money, why buy vegetable bouillon cubes when you can make your own? Dehydrated veggie scraps blended with salt and herbs create a homemade seasoning that rivals anything on the shelf. A tough cut of meat can be a challenge, but with the right technique, even budget-friendly options can be transformed into something tender and flavorful. One of the simplest ways to achieve this? Baking soda. A small amount can raise the pH level on the meat's surface, preventing proteins from bonding too tightly during cooking. The result is a more tender bite without the need for costly marinades or slow cooking for hours. This technique works particularly well for stir-fried beef, like in a classic beef and broccoli dish. Instead of splurging on expensive cuts, a quick baking soda treatment makes even the most affordable steak cuts fork tender. Just a sprinkle, a short rest, and a rinse before cooking. It's a game changer. While we're on the topic of maximizing ingredients, let's talk about leftovers. That extra grilled steak from last night? Instead of reheating it into a tough, overcooked mess, slice it thin and give it a quick flash fry with a homemade spice blend. Store-bought rubs are convenient, but mixing your own saves money and eliminates additives. And if you buy meat in bulk, don't forget to freeze it in portions. A little planning, like seasoning before freezing, can save time and effort later. Cracking eggs for breakfast is routine, but what happens to the shells afterward? Most people toss them without a second thought, but these brittle leftovers are packed with potential. Eggshells are nearly pure calcium carbonate, the same compound found in limestone and chalk, making them a powerful, all-natural fertilizer for your garden. Crushed and worked into the soil, they slowly break down, enriching plants with essential nutrients and helping to neutralize acidity. It's a simple way to repurpose what would otherwise go to waste. But the usefulness of eggshells doesn't stop at gardening. Those sharp, gritty edges can do wonders for cleaning your garbage disposal. Toss a handful into the drain, run cold water, and let the blades grind them down. The texture helps remove built-up residue while deodorizing the sink, a natural cleaning method that costs nothing. And if you're thinking about store-bought plant food, reconsider. With eggshells, coffee grounds, and banana peels, you can make a homemade nutrient mix that rivals anything on the shelf. As for freezing, while eggshells themselves don't need preserving, the eggs inside them do. Every part of an ingredient can be useful. You just have to see beyond its usual purpose. A loaf of bread has a short lifespan, but its usefulness doesn't end when it turns stale. Instead of tossing it, repurpose it into something that lasts: breadcrumbs. Whether it's for breading crispy chicken cutlets or adding texture to meatballs, homemade breadcrumbs are a simple, cost-effective alternative to store-bought varieties. Stale bread may have lost its softness, but with a quick blitz in a food processor, it transforms into a pantry staple that can extend the life of countless dishes. Preserving breadcrumbs is just as easy as making them. A quick toast in the oven removes any remaining moisture, ensuring they stay fresh for weeks. For longer storage, freezing them in airtight bags keeps them ready to use at a moment's notice. Buying prepackaged breadcrumbs might seem convenient, but why spend money on something that can be made in minutes from leftovers? Freshly made breadcrumbs have better texture and flavor than their processed counterparts, giving a crispier, more satisfying crunch. And if you're feeling creative, mix in dried herbs or grated cheese for a homemade Italian-style blend. Deep-fried chicken is a classic comfort food, but after the last crispy bite, there's one question left. What happens to all that oil? Pouring it down the drain isn't an option unless you enjoy plumbing bills, and tossing it out after one use is just throwing money away. The solution? Straining and reusing it. Properly filtered, cooking oil can be used multiple times, preserving its quality and saving you from buying new bottles every time you fry. Filtering is simple. Just let the oil cool, then strain it through a fine mesh sieve or cheesecloth to remove food particles. Stored in a sealed container, it stays good for weeks. And while reusing oil saves money, it also improves flavor. Frying something like homemade onion rings leaves behind subtle, savory notes that add depth to the next batch. It's the same principle that gives old-fashioned diners their signature taste. Their fryers hold years of seasoning. For even longer preservation, oil can be frozen in small portions. This prevents it from going rancid and makes it easy to grab only what's needed. And if the goal is to avoid store-bought products altogether, used oil can even be turned into homemade soap, a technique as old as cooking itself. Bananas have a frustratingly short window of perfection. One day they're bright yellow, the next they're covered in brown spots and heading toward mush. But before tossing them, consider this. Overripe bananas are at their peak for baking. Their natural sugars intensify, making them ideal for banana bread, pancakes, or even homemade ice cream. Instead of wasting them, freeze them. A simple peel-and-bag approach ensures they stay good for months, ready whenever you need them. Preserving bananas this way also saves money. Store-bought frozen fruit can be expensive, yet freezing your own costs nothing extra. And here's a trick. Slice bananas before freezing so they're easy to blend straight into smoothies. No need for added sugar or ice cubes. It's a natural way to sweeten without relying on processed alternatives. Maximizing ingredients doesn't stop at baking. Those frozen bananas can be mashed into homemade baby food, blended into a creamy dairy-free milkshake, or even used as a base for banana pancakes. And if you're feeling creative, try making a simple 2-ingredient banana nice cream by blending frozen bananas until smooth. No artificial flavors, no added sugar, just pure fruit. Store-bought condiments are convenient, but they come with hidden costs, both in price and ingredients. Many are packed with preservatives, artificial flavors, and unnecessary sugars. Making them at home isn't just a money saver, it's a way to control what goes into your food. Take ketchup, for example. A simple mix of tomato paste, vinegar, and spices creates a version that's richer and fresher than anything off the shelf. No corn syrup, no mystery ingredients, just real flavor. Mayonnaise is another staple that's surprisingly easy to make. Just eggs, oil, and a bit of lemon juice or vinegar whisked together transform into a smooth, creamy spread. And once you've mastered the base, the possibilities expand. A little garlic turns it into aioli, a dash of chipotle makes it smoky, and fresh herbs elevate it beyond anything store-bought. preserving homemade condiments is just as simple. Mustard, for example, gets better with time as the flavors develop. Stored in a jar, it lasts for months. Even ketchup and mayo stay fresh for weeks when refrigerated. For those who love to plan ahead, freezing homemade pesto or barbecue sauce in small portions means flavor is always on hand. A pot of cooked rice never seems to run out. It starts as a side dish, but by the next day, it's a cold, clumpy afterthought in the fridge. Instead of letting it dry out or tossing it, turn it into something new. Leftover rice is one of the most versatile ingredients in the kitchen, capable of becoming an entirely different meal with minimal effort. Fried rice is the obvious choice, and for good reason. Restaurants don't use fresh rice. They use day-old grains because they fry up better. A quick toss in a pan with some oil, vegetables, and seasonings transforms leftovers into a dish that's even better the second time around. But that's not the only option. Rice pudding takes the same leftovers in a completely different direction. A little milk, sugar, and a dash of cinnamon turn last night's dinner into a warm, comforting dessert. And if neither of those appeal, rice also works as a thickener in soups or a filler in meatloaf, stretching meals further without anyone noticing. Freezing rice is another smart move. Packed in portioned bags, it reheats quickly without losing texture. Whether used for savory or sweet dishes, no grain should go to waste, because in the right hands, leftovers are just ingredients waiting for a second chance. A half-eaten bag of potato chips never quite survives the test of time. Left open for just a little too long, they lose their crunch and become disappointingly stale. But before tossing them in the trash, consider this. Those chips still have one last job to do. Crushed up, they make the perfect crispy topping for casseroles, adding a layer of texture and flavor that takes baked dishes to the next level. Casseroles have always been about resourcefulness, a way to stretch ingredients and make the most of leftovers. That's why topping them with crushed chips, whether potato, tortilla, or even pretzels, fits right in. The heat from the oven revives their crispiness, giving dishes like tuna noodle casserole or baked macaroni and cheese a satisfying crunch. No breadcrumbs? No problem. Those leftover chips do the same job, just with more flavor. Maximizing ingredients also means using what's available instead of buying extra. Store-bought, crispy toppings can be expensive, but repurposing stale chips costs nothing. And if there's a surplus, freezing them extends their shelf life, ensuring they're always on hand for the next meal. In a kitchen that values resourcefulness, nothing goes to waste, not even a forgotten bag of chips that lost its crunch. A loaf of bread rarely disappears before it starts to go stale. And while dry, hardened slices might not make for the best sandwich, they're far from useless. With a little heat and seasoning, they transform into golden, crispy croutons, one of the easiest ways to repurpose leftovers while adding crunch to soups and salads. Store-bought croutons are convenient, but they often come with unnecessary preservatives and a price tag that doesn't make sense when the main ingredient is something most households already have. Making them at home means controlling the flavors: garlic, parmesan, rosemary, or even a dash of paprika for extra depth. Plus, the process is almost foolproof. Cut, toss with oil and seasoning, and bake until crisp. Preserving croutons is just as simple. Stored in an airtight container, they stay fresh for weeks, ready to elevate even the simplest dish. For longer storage, they can even be frozen, ensuring that no stale bread ever goes to waste. Vegetables don't always age gracefully. A crisp bell pepper turns soft, carrots lose their snap, and broccoli starts looking less than fresh. But just because produce is past its prime doesn't mean it's past saving. A simple stir-fry can revive those fading ingredients, transforming them into a flavorful, budget-friendly meal with minimal effort. Stir-fries aren't just about convenience, they're about flexibility. Leftover green beans? Toss them in. A lone mushroom or a handful of spinach? Perfect additions. By using what's already in the fridge, nothing goes to waste. And since the quick cooking method preserves texture and nutrients, even slightly wilted vegetables get a second chance. Maximizing ingredients also means cutting costs on sauce. Store-bought stir-fry sauces can be pricey, but making one at home is easy. A simple mix of soy sauce, garlic, ginger, and a dash of honey rivals anything in a bottle, without the added preservatives. Freezing pre-cut veggies is another smart way to extend shelf life. Portioning them in resealable bags makes weeknight meals faster, preventing last-minute grocery runs. A forgotten zucchini today could be tomorrow's quick and satisfying dinner. Most people peel potatoes and toss the skins without a second thought, but they're actually throwing away the best part. Those thin, nutrient-packed peels crisp up beautifully in the oven or fryer, transforming into a snack that rivals store-bought chips, without the extra cost or preservatives. It's a perfect example of making the most out of what's already in the kitchen. Instead of buying another bag of chips, repurposing potato peels is a smarter option. Tossed with a little oil, salt, and seasoning, they crisp up in minutes, turning what would have been waste into a crunchy, flavorful snack. And for those who like variety, adding smoked paprika, parmesan, or even a dash of vinegar creates different flavors without reaching for a packaged version. Creative cooking isn't just about making new meals, it's about rethinking waste. If there are more peels than needed, freezing them in portions keeps them fresh for later use. Once baked or fried, they can even be stored in an airtight container to maintain their crispness. Maximizing ingredients like this not only reduces food waste but also stretches every dollar spent. A potato may be one of the cheapest staples in the kitchen, but when every part is used, its value increases even more. Smoothies have a wholesome reputation, packed with fresh fruits and veggies. But there's one nutritious trick many overlook: using vegetable scraps. Those spinach leaves just past their prime, carrot tops you usually toss, even beet greens can blend effortlessly into your morning drink. Instead of letting these nutrient-rich leftovers wither away in the fridge, freezing them for smoothies means they stay fresh and ready, ensuring nothing valuable ends up wasted. Maximizing ingredients like this not only trims grocery bills but also boosts nutritional intake without extra cost. Surprisingly, carrot tops are high in antioxidants and minerals, rivaling more popular greens like kale. Blended with banana, frozen berries, or yogurt, these overlooked veggie scraps elevate homemade smoothies beyond anything store-bought versions offer, minus the added sugar or questionable additives. Creative cooks know to pre-portion and freeze these scraps in individual bags, ready for busy mornings. It's homemade convenience that cuts down both prep time and food waste. And speaking of store-bought shortcuts, why spend extra on powdered supplements or expensive health drinks when the best nutrients are already hiding in your kitchen? A lemon's job doesn't end after the juice is squeezed. That fragrant peel, often tossed aside, is packed with flavor and hidden uses that go far beyond the fruit bowl. Grated citrus zest, whether from lemons, oranges, or limes, adds an instant boost to cakes, marinades, and salad dressings, turning ordinary dishes into something brighter and more complex. It's a classic way to maximize ingredients without spending an extra dime. For those who want to ditch store-bought cleaners, citrus peels are the secret to a homemade alternative. Soaking them in vinegar for a couple of weeks creates a natural grease-cutting cleaner with a fresh, citrusy scent. It's a smarter, chemical-free way to keep countertops shining while making full use of every part of the fruit. Clever cooks don't stop there. Freezing zest in small portions ensures that flavor is always on hand, ready to be sprinkled into sauces or baked goods. And if there's an abundance of peels, dehydrating them and grinding them into a fine powder creates a homemade citrus seasoning, perfect for adding brightness to everything from seafood to roasted vegetables. Pre-mixed spices are one of the easiest ways to overspend in the grocery store. Taco seasoning, Italian blend, Cajun mix, convenient, yes, but also marked up significantly for something you can easily make at home. By buying bulk spices and mixing them yourself, you get the same flavors for a fraction of the cost, minus the preservatives and added fillers that store-bought versions sneak in. Maximizing ingredients is about more than just saving money. It's about customization. A homemade taco seasoning can be adjusted for heat, a DIY poultry rub can skip the extra salt, and a personal curry blend can highlight your favorite spices. The difference in taste is noticeable, and so is the difference in price. Freezing isn't just for food. Spice blends keep their potency longer when stored in airtight containers in the freezer, preventing them from going stale. And if you've ever thrown out a half-used jar of an obscure seasoning after realizing you only needed a teaspoon, making blends in small batches eliminates that waste. Creative cooking techniques like this take seconds but pay off every time you cook. A half-full pot of coffee often gets poured down the drain, but that leftover brew still has plenty of life left in it. Instead of wasting it, repurpose it into something sweet, coffee-infused desserts. Tiramisu is a prime example, where espresso or strong coffee soaks into ladyfingers, creating the rich, deep flavor that defines the dish. But coffee's role in baking goes far beyond that classic. Chocolate cake benefits tremendously from a splash of coffee. The bitterness enhances the cocoa, making flavors bolder and more complex. Store-bought coffee extracts promise this effect, but why pay extra when real brewed coffee does the job for free? Even homemade ice cream takes on a new dimension with a bit of chilled leftover coffee mixed in. Freezing coffee in ice cube trays is another way to preserve every drop. These frozen cubes are perfect for blending into milkshakes, adding to smoothies, or keeping an iced coffee from getting watered down. They're also an easy way to add depth to stews or barbecue sauces without overpowering the dish. Creative cooking techniques turn what seems like waste into an opportunity. A simple cup of leftover coffee isn't just a forgotten morning ritual, it's a key ingredient waiting to elevate the next dessert or dish. Most people use the leafy tops of herbs and discard the stems, but those stems hold just as much flavor, sometimes even more. Instead of throwing them away, they can be blended into homemade pesto, turning what would have been waste into a rich, vibrant sauce. Basil stems, cilantro stalks, and even parsley stems can all be pulsed together with garlic, olive oil, and nuts to create a pesto that's just as bold and aromatic as any store-bought version. Prepackaged pesto can be pricey, and it often comes with preservatives to extend its shelf life. Making it at home not only saves money, but it also allows for adjustments. Less oil, more garlic, a different mix of herbs. Even the type of nuts can change. Pine nuts are traditional, but walnuts or almonds work just as well. For long-term use, freezing pesto in ice cube trays makes portioning easy. Each cube is a quick way to add fresh flavor to pasta, sandwiches, or roasted vegetables. And if pesto isn't needed right away, blending the stems with a little oil before freezing keeps them from wilting and preserves their bright flavor. Fresh herbs have a way of going from vibrant to wilted overnight. One moment, they're bursting with fragrance. The next, they're a sad, limp reminder of forgotten meal plans. Instead of letting them go to waste, freezing herbs in olive oil locks in their flavor, making them just as useful weeks or even months later. It's a simple process. Chop the herbs, pack them into ice cube trays, and cover them with oil. Once frozen, these cubes become instant flavor boosters for soups, sautés, and roasts. There's no need to buy expensive store-bought herb pastes or dried versions that lack the freshness of the real thing. Homemade herb cubes are the perfect way to maximize ingredients and preserve what's already in the kitchen. Repurposing leftovers isn't just about cooked food, it applies to fresh ingredients too. Leftover rosemary from a roast? Basil from homemade pesto? Instead of throwing out what won't be used immediately, freezing preserves their peak flavor. Plus, this technique saves time. No chopping or measuring needed when cooking. Creative cooking isn't always about creating something new. Sometimes it's about preventing waste before it happens. A wedge of Parmesan is a kitchen essential, but what happens when all that's left is the hard, seemingly inedible rind? Most people toss it without hesitation, but that leftover piece holds a secret. It's packed with deep, concentrated flavor. Dropped into a simmering pot of soup, stew, or tomato sauce, a cheese rind melts down just enough to infuse dishes with a rich, umami depth that no store-bought seasoning can replicate. This technique isn't new. Italian cooks have been using Parmesan rinds in minestrone for generations. The slow heat coaxes out the last remnants of flavor, turning a leftover into a valuable ingredient. And it's not just for Parmesan. The rinds of aged cheeses like Pecorino or Gruyere work just as well, adding complexity to broths or even enhancing homemade risotto. For those who don't need them immediately, freezing cheese rinds ensures they're always on hand. Instead of buying expensive pre-made soup bases or flavor enhancers, saving and repurposing rinds does the job naturally. Creative cooking is about making every part of an ingredient count. A cheese rind may not be something you eat on its own, but in the right dish, it transforms from a forgotten scrap into the secret weapon of a well-balanced meal. Boxed pancake mix is a grocery store staple, but what's really inside? Flour, sugar, baking powder. Ingredients most home kitchens already have. Instead of paying extra for convenience, making a homemade pancake mix is just as simple, far more affordable, and free from unnecessary additives. It's one of the easiest ways to create a store-bought favorite at home while controlling exactly what goes in. Maximizing ingredients means thinking ahead. A homemade mix can be stored in an airtight container for weeks, ready to go whenever a pancake craving strikes. And if there's extra batter, no need to waste it. Cooked pancakes freeze exceptionally well, making them perfect for quick breakfasts later. A short reheat in the toaster and they're just as good as fresh. This approach also opens the door for creativity. Want a protein-packed version? Swap in whole wheat or almond flour? Prefer waffles? The same mix works with a few minor adjustments. And forget about store-bought flavored pancake mixes. Cinnamon, cocoa powder, or even freeze-dried fruit powder can be added for a custom blend that beats anything on the shelf. Baking powder is a kitchen essential, but what many people don't realize is that it's just 2 ingredients: baking soda and cream of tartar. Instead of buying pre-mixed versions, making it at home takes seconds and eliminates unnecessary fillers like cornstarch or aluminum-based additives found in some store-bought brands. It's one of the simplest ways to replace a pantry staple while saving money. Maximizing ingredients means knowing their hidden potential. Baking soda on its own is a powerful leavening agent, but it needs an acid to activate. That's where cream of tartar comes in. The combination produces the same rise in baked goods as commercial baking powder without any of the extra cost. And because homemade versions can be made in small batches, there's no risk of it losing potency over time, a common issue with prepackaged varieties. Preserving freshness is easy. A quick mix of 2 parts cream of tartar to 1 part baking soda creates a perfectly balanced homemade baking powder. Stored in an airtight container, it stays effective for months. Creative cooking techniques often come down to understanding the basics. A fluffy biscuit, a perfectly risen cake. These don't require expensive store-bought powders. Just a little chemistry, a well-stocked pantry, and the knowledge that homemade is often the better choice. Store-bought vegetable chips may seem like a healthy alternative, but they often come with a hefty price tag and unnecessary additives. Making them at home, however, is not only cheaper, it also means full control over ingredients, seasoning, and crispiness. With just a few simple steps, thinly sliced potatoes, zucchini, or sweet potatoes can turn into a crunchy, satisfying snack that rivals anything from a bag. Maximizing ingredients starts with using what's already on hand. That lone zucchini in the fridge? The last 2 sweet potatoes in the pantry? Instead of letting them sit until they're past their prime, slicing and baking them ensures they don't go to waste. And for those looking to repurpose leftovers, even saved potato peels crisp up beautifully when tossed with oil and seasoning, creating a zero-waste snack. Preserving homemade vegetable chips is easy. Stored in an airtight container, they stay crisp for days. Freezing isn't necessary, but pre-slicing and storing raw vegetable rounds in the freezer can make future batches even faster. Creative cooking techniques like this prove that homemade versions often beat store-bought, both in flavor and cost. No preservatives, no artificial flavors, just pure, fresh ingredients transformed into something delicious. A pot of pasta often leaves behind more than just a full plate. It leaves leftovers that sit in the fridge, waiting for a second chance. Instead of reheating them into a soggy disappointment, those extra noodles can be repurposed into something entirely new. Pasta salad, stir-fries, and baked dishes are all easy ways to stretch leftovers into fresh, flavorful meals without wasting a single bite. Maximizing ingredients starts with thinking beyond the original dish. Leftover spaghetti can be tossed with a homemade dressing, fresh vegetables, and herbs to create a quick pasta salad. Or, for a heartier option, baking it with cheese and sauce transforms it into a bubbly, comforting casserole. Even stir-frying day-old pasta with garlic, olive oil, and a handful of vegetables turns it into a simple but satisfying meal. No need for takeout. Freezing cooked pasta is another way to extend its life. Portioning and storing it with a little oil prevents clumping, making it easy to reheat for future meals. And for those looking to replace store-bought convenience foods, homemade frozen pasta dishes are a budget-friendly alternative to prepackaged meals. A bountiful harvest or a bulk grocery deal can sometimes lead to more produce than a kitchen can handle. But instead of letting fruits, vegetables, or homemade sauces go to waste, canning preserves them at their peak, locking in freshness and extending shelf life for months or even years. It's a tried-and-true method that generations before us relied on, and for good reason. It turns excess into convenience, making home-cooked meals possible long after the season has passed. Maximizing ingredients is at the heart of canning. Overripe tomatoes can be turned into homemade pasta sauce, sealed in jars, and stored for quick, no-fuss dinners. Leftover berries that are too soft for snacking become jams and preserves, a homemade alternative to sugar-loaded store-bought versions. Even vegetable scraps can be simmered into broth and canned, eliminating the need to buy boxed stock. Freezing is often the go-to method for preservation, but canning offers a shelf-stable solution that requires no extra freezer space. Properly sealed jars can last for years, making them ideal for long-term storage. And when it comes to creative cooking, nothing beats opening a jar of homemade salsa in the middle of winter and tasting the peak of summer. All good things come to an end. Now, the French weren't fans of the rabbit pie, so they decided to whip up a pigeon pie instead. This delicacy dates all the way back to the 17th century when James Hart, a Scottish physician, wrote in 1633 that pigeon pies were usually served with far too much pepper. It became an instant hit after Hart's paper, and people started cutting down on the pepper a bit. This crispy dish was a savory game pie made of pigeon meat and various other ingredients traditional to French cuisine. The buttery crust made it a luxurious treat which was common on banquet tables. It was a tradition for wives to make pigeon pie after their husbands spent long days hunting for the delicious bird. But hey, tastes change, and so do our. Molasses is not the first thing that comes to mind when people think of sweeteners. But if you opened Grandma's pantry door, you'd see this thick and gooey liquid ready to enhance the taste of everything she baked. Cane sugar has to take back its seat because molasses adds a unique flavor to almost any dish. It doesn't look like much or anything special, yet it contains numerous nutrients and adds a burst of flavor. Getting its source from sugarcane or sugar beets, molasses can be compared to the sweetener's grandmaster, the sweetness of which can be mediocre to robust. Well, did you know that molasses is derived in the process of sugar manufacturing? It's like the bonus prize that no one knew they needed. Now for some more interesting facts about molasses. It is packed with nutrients, rich in vitamins and minerals such as iron, calcium, and potassium, among others. This sticky sweetener is perhaps one of the most versatile you will come across. You can use it in cookies, marinades, barbecue sauces, and even as a sweetener for baked beans. Stored properly, molasses can last for years, just like those hidden Christmas cookies from last year's batch. As a country, we can thank Texas for a lot of things. Tex-Mex cuisine, an infinite supply of memes thanks to country music, rodeos, some of the nicest BBQ sauces you'll ever have, and a guaranteed chuckle every time you have to speak to a redneck Republican. If you want to keep adding to the list, a good chili con carne is something that'll make you even more thankful the state exists and has developed into the savory jackpot it is. The dish pretty much means chili with meat, and it's a wonderful blend of beef, chilies, and spices with roots in the Mexican borderlands. It's somewhat become a symbol of Texas cooking too, which is known for not being easy on your stomach at all. This dish is no different because it takes cubed beef, chili peppers, and beans, plus some canned tomatoes, and puts them in a slow cooker. The one-pot way of cooking it was kind of considered a massive game changer because, while yes, you could just leave it to cook now, it meant that you didn't have to stir the chili constantly. The thing with chili con carne is that unless you did that stirring, you really wouldn't get the same bang for your buck. Inexpensive, popular in chili parlors, and very good with a cold beer, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out how this dish has all the elements it needs to succeed in middle-class Texas. As far as the chili craze goes, when America did go through phases of wanting spicier food, a lot of states besides Texas would go back to this southern classic. Some say this dish is also a Native American classic because if you go to the Southwest, you'll find remnants of old tribes, like the Pueblo, who still make variants of this dish. Theirs are even more traditional, with the recipes largely unchanged since pre-colonial European times. Chili con carne is a wonderful melting pot of indigenous, Mexican, and Spanish that takes full advantage of the different backgrounds that are present in American cooking. Vinegar pie is the rather odd dish on this list that proves that at times of desperation, anyone will eat anything. Vinegar pie started spreading infectiously out of states like Pennsylvania in the start of the 1930s and tops even dandelion salad when it comes to being budget-friendly. All you would need is an open crust, vinegar, sugar, and some eggs to create this unique pie. To cover the mediocre taste, people would coat the crust with a meringue. It was an affectionate treat to bring in case of a celebration and was easy to make if you had a sweet craving. The dish was also pretty delicious if you were able to get over the sour vinegar taste and focus on the meringue. People really wanted a sweet treat at the end of a hard week spent cutting corners and working long hours, and small joys like vinegar pies were what kept people sustained. Eating hearts isn't as common today, but if you ever tried this one, you'd understand the hype. Bear meat might seem like something out of a survivalist's handbook, but it was once a prized delicacy in many cultures. The roast loin of bear was considered a special occasion dish, reserved for feasts and celebrations. This dish has deep roots in the culinary traditions of the early American settlers. As you can imagine, hunting a bear was a daunting task, so this meal was a reward for bravery. Apart from the hunting of the bears, this one wasn't complicated to whip up. All you needed was the loin, which is the tender strip of meat along the backbone, which was often roasted over an open fire. Dough starter is a magical concoction that turns easy ingredients into fluffy, delicious bread. It was a staple in Grandma's pantry long before gluten unfastened was even a factor. This ancient tradition goes back hundreds of years, proving that while the era has advanced, our love for an awesome loaf of bread hasn't changed a chunk. The best part? That sourdough starter can live forever. With a bit of care, it can outlive Grandma herself. Just consider it. A little jar of gooey goodness bubbling away, equipped to convert any dough right into a crusty masterpiece. Sourdough is a real multitasker in the kitchen. You could make the whole lot, from classic loaves to pancakes, waffles, or even pizza crust with that starter. And don't even get me started on the flavor. It has a unique tanginess that normal bread just can't compete with. Plus, some say that the wild yeast found in sourdough can be easier on your digestive system. It's like a pleasant little bacteria party to your gut. But be cautious. If you forget about your starter, it will develop into a science experiment gone wrong. No one wants to create a brand new breed of kitchen mold. So, next time you tear right into a warm slice of sourdough, don't forget Grandma's old jar of starter, bubbling away like a wizard's potion, bringing comfort and pleasure with every bite. Arroz con pollo is a treasured dish rooted in Spanish culture, delighting taste buds and gracing dinner tables for countless generations. More than just a meal, arroz con pollo brings warmth, comfort, and nostalgia with every bite. It embodies the simple pleasures that food can bring, comfort found not in someone's shoulder or at the bottom of a bottle, but in something as humble as rice. When topped with tender, perfectly seasoned chicken, this dish has a way of grounding you, reminding you of life's small, genuine joys. It's for those who find solace in food, in the gathering of loved ones, and in flavors that speak of tradition. Arroz con pollo is an invitation to relax, indulge, and reconnect. If that resonates, then this dish was always meant for you, promising satisfaction, warmth, and the perfect blend of flavor in every bite. Cities like Miami and New York were some of the first places where Caribbean culture touched down and made a name for itself. In terms of the middle class, It was a pretty economic and practical dish. You had all your health-related needs covered, and it didn't cost much at all, with an entire family meal costing maybe $4 or $5. Even less, actually, since one of the key highlights of this dish was its ability to turn a bit of chicken into a show stealer. A lot of dishes make ample use of protein and meat, but they often don't optimize each lb of beef or chicken in there, so you get a lot of bites that feel extra gamey or chewy and don't have enough flavor. That's not something you have to worry about with arroz con pollo, and that's why it's still a pretty popular dish even today, especially now that slow cookers are in an entirely different league than what they used to be when they were first introduced to the general public. Egg drop soup for some royal courts was a show of a chef's skill. In 1930, America the soup became a beloved soup of the masses who were struggling to make an honest paycheck. Bread from last night and eggs beaten so thoroughly that the preparation itself doubled as a forearm workout resulted in an incredibly rich soup. Sometimes, if a home cook felt particularly fancy, they would have chicken either boiled or shredded in the mix. Using the chicken stock was also a common way to not let anything go to waste, since getting the most bang for your buck out of poultry became a habit of everyone. Most would just have this with eggs and throw in some ginger, chives and olives, or anchovies. We would definitely like to see this make a comeback with a less cost-oriented version that really explores the dish. Cabbage. If you want to give your grandparents a rush of nostalgia, ask them about this meaty goodness, and who knows, your grandma might even dust off some cookbooks. Squirrel stew might sound unusual today, but it was a popular dish in rural areas. Yep, our bushy-tailed friends were once a common ingredient in many kitchens. Also known as Brunswick stew, it was a tomato-based stew generally involving local beans, vegetables, and originally small game meat such as squirrel. However, many variations from around the world used rabbit meat too. The origin of this meaty stew is controversial at best, as the states of Virginia and Georgia both claim its birth, with Brunswick County in Virginia and the city of Brunswick in Georgia claiming it was developed there. To keep things peaceful, let's just say Virginia and Georgia both played a role in creating this delicious stew. Squirrel meat was easily hunted and provided a necessary source of protein. With the rise of chicken, squirrel stew has fallen out of flavor. But hey, this one is pretty easy to whip up and will satisfy your Thursday night meat cravings like no other. Hardtack, the last biscuit standing. Let's be honest, hardtack isn't anyone's idea of comfort food. But don't underestimate this resilient little biscuit. It's the culinary Swiss Army knife. Made to last, hardtack has been an emergency food staple for centuries, and if you peeked into Grandma's pantry, you might still find a few of these unbreakable snacks lurking. Designed for sailors, soldiers, and anyone needing long-lasting nourishment, hardtack keeps it simple with just flour, water, and salt. It may sound basic, but that's the secret to its survival power. It can last for years. In fact, some hardtack has even been pulled from shipwrecks, still rock hard and technically edible. Now that is longevity. Though not exactly soft or flavorful, hardtack has been a literal lifesaver. It's tough enough to be gnawed on as is, softened in coffee, or crumbled into soup. Just don't expect a gourmet experience. It's about as exciting as chewing on a brick. But for Grandma, this was essential, a way to get carbs when nothing fresh was around. So, while today's diets lean towards fresh and flavorful, there's something endearing about a food that stood the test of time. Let's go on over to Creole cuisine. Want to know a hot spot for that kind of cooking back in the 1970s? It was shrimp Creole, which had hints of several other styles of cooking. You could have something with French, Spanish, and African influences all in one bite. That's a pretty vast variety of flavors, so let's break down what shrimp Creole had out of all of that. You have your basics like bell peppers, onions, and celery, but it also had canned tomatoes for a no-fuss sauce that really soaked in all of the aromatics and gave the shrimp a pretty unique flair. You could make this dish for around $2.80 back then, because per lb of shrimp usually cost you around $1.50 or $2 back then. That's a pretty bare minimum price, but let's say you were cooking for a family of 4. You would have been good in like $10 or $15 maximum. The whole mix of onions, celery, and peppers was actually considered a trinity in Cajun and Creole cooking. Shrimp Creole also made a lot of use of thyme, parsley, okra, and garlic as well, so you could really mix and match and see what worked best for you. Not everyone liked the traditional versions of the dish, and I can't blame them because it's meant for people who grew up having a completely different palate than ours. All the same, this dish, which is traditionally served over rice, was considered one of the greatest hits of the cuisine. Cajun and Creole in general had found a pretty nice home for themselves in places like New Orleans and Louisiana. Restaurants like Antoine's and Tujag's in the 19th century were establishing a solid Creole cooking scene, and by the 20th century, cookbooks had already featured shrimp Creole as a solid dish you could rely on whenever you needed more seafood in your diet. Boiled carrot sandwiches was created from the weird culinary gap left by increasing prices and thinner savings accounts. Like we said, people wanted vegetables that ticked the cheaper and tastier most boxes for them. However, even that was getting tough. Some of the worst stretches of the Great Depression left people with frustrations and creativity alike. Whipping up dishes like this was common, and the boiled carrot sandwich definitely stayed during the time because of its simplicity. Americans love a good sandwich, and they adore an easy-to-cook filling. Boiled carrot sandwiches definitely met most of the criteria, as roasting cheese to create an open-faced sandwich was a popular choice. Suffering the same fate as other dishes on this list, the boiled carrot sandwich eventually died out as economic growth increased in America. Prune pudding. Elk meat was replaced by more readily available options like beef and pork. It's a shame, really, because elk roast can be a delicious and healthy meal. Pickled beef tongue was a classic back in the day. Some love it, others, not so much. Now, before you jump to any conclusions, just hear me out because it's not as bizarre as it sounds. Yeah, beef tongue was found in many national cuisines and was used for taco fillings in Mexico and for open-faced sandwiches in the United Kingdom. Beef tongue, whether braised or pickled, was a versatile dish served both hot and cold. Believe it or not, it was a staple back in the day. It actually tastes pretty good if you close your eyes and pretend you're not eating beef tongue, because that can sound a tad bit too much. It's not the healthiest meat though, because beef tongue is very high in fat, which contributes up to 72% of its caloric content. It has become rare today, but you will be surprised to see how many places still sell beef tongue burritos down in Mexico. Homemade vinegar was the magical elixir lurking in Grandma's pantry, the secret ingredient for everything, from tangy pickles to household cleaning. For most people, vinegar is a simple ingredient that is placed on the table as a condiment. This fermented concoction was the functional kitchen multi-tool that could and would do it all. Making vinegar at home is kind of an experiment. Taking some kind of fruit juice, say apple or grape, adding sugar into it and letting Mother Nature do the rest of her magic. Grandma would use it in her pickling adventures, ensuring those cucumbers were brined to perfection, ready to become a crunchy side dish. Why spend your hard-earned money on store-bought when you have fresh homemade food in a jar? But vinegar wasn't just for the kitchen. Oh no! Grandma would use it to clean surfaces, remove stains, and even freshen the laundry. Just imagine the confusion when people realized that the sour-smelling liquid could also work wonders around the house. Besides, homemade vinegar is organically better than its commercial counterparts, packed with probiotics and beneficial bacteria. So, next time you reach for a bottle of vinegar, remember that Grandma wasn't just a kitchen magician. She was a pioneer of practical living, turning something as simple as fermented fruit juice into a pantry staple that helped her cook, clean, and preserve all in one fell swoop. On the other end of the spectrum, we have something brazenly American, with something with a lot of influences from spicy recipes popular in Mexican cooking. I was expecting something that would set you on fire like you were, but tamale pies are actually pretty neat in that regard. They're kind of like a build-your-own burger because you can adjust a lot of things about this to create your own tamale pie specific to your tastes. Basically, there's no universal standard, no golden rule of thumb you need to follow here. That's probably why it became such a well-loved middle-class dish, because it meant that people could easily tweak the recipe however they needed according to whatever was there in the pantry. Hey, sometimes it's the last of the month and you just don't have a lot of oomph going on in your pantry. Sometimes you get a slight bonus and you decide to get that better, premium cut of meat. Both times can be a tamale pie night if you're down. You couldn't say that before the slow cooker because it meant that you'd have to spend a lot of your day babysitting the dish, but now, the dish just makes itself really. If you want a tame introduction to Mexican food, tamale pies might be a good place to start, or if you just like tomato sauce-based pies with chili seasonings and cornmeal. Dandelion salad might sound like a fairy tale-like name for an incredibly frugal but delicious meal. By now, you might have noticed the scavenger vibe in terms of ingredients of the dishes so far. People making anything out of whatever they had on hand. Economic downturns often feature lifestyle changes, and the Great Depression was no other, sending people on a scramble to find and eat anything. Dandelion salad took scramble seriously as the meal involved finding and foraging dandelions. You would cut out all the roots, flowers, and waste to make the dressing for a very healthy salad. For people, especially those on a diet and a budget, this was a godsend. For a garnish, all people would usually put on it was lemon juice and olive oil. A dash of salt and you were good to go at basically no cost. Before chicken became everyone's favorite pie stuffing, rabbit pie was a favorite on the Easter table. Made out of tender rabbit meal, this savory pie was a household favorite in many rural areas. Rabbit meat is not only rich in flavor, but it's full of nutrients, which made this a healthy choice for many and a staple of the American pioneers. Plus, rabbit meat didn't cost a fortune like most meat back in the day and was widely available. Along with rabbit meat, ingredients of the filling of a rabbit pie typically included onions, celery, and carrots. Some English variations included prunes, bacon, and cider, while the Australians sometimes included the food paste Vegemite. Rabbits aren't as common as they were back then, so rabbit pie has vanished from our tables and Easter traditions. You know what Oatmeal remains to be the uncontested breakfast winner when it comes to the grandma's pantry breakfast rating of the most filling for breakfast until lunch. When it comes to healthy breakfast choices, oatmeal is definitely a win-win, providing a filling and warm experience. Forget the novelty of breakfast bowls. Grandma knew a steaming bowl of oats could power you up for any endeavor, whether it was a hard day at the office or an all-out snowball fight in the backyard. Loaded with fiber and important nutrients that the body requires, oatmeal has the marvelous effect of making anyone full longer than a bowl of cereal sweetened with sugar. You can dress it up with fruits, nuts, honey, or even a splash of maple syrup. Feeling adventurous? Add a spoonful of peanut butter and some chocolate chips, and you've turned breakfast into a treat that feels like dessert. What's even better? Oatmeal is a long-term product, and that is why it is an ideal product for a pantry, for emergencies, and for lazy Sundays. Historically, oatmeal has been around for thousands of years, but Grandma had her own secret: the perfect cooking time. Again, this is about getting that balance to the texture that makes it neither creamy nor chewy. The next time you are searching for a healthy breakfast meal, grab that bag of oats. I'll forgive you for thinking this is another showcase of how we tried to copy other countries' culinary mojo, because Swiss steak does sound pretty well Swiss. What might raise your eyebrow is that this is actually a purely American dish. It involved braising, which is a kind of slow cooking that tenderizes any cut of meat to the maximum, and this one involved a round steak in a tomato-based sauce with bell peppers. It was a pretty big classic in the 30s and 40s. Whenever people could afford to get some cuts of meat, they were usually cheap, and as a result, they were more than likely to be tough ones. A dish like this that could take even rubber disguised as beef and turn it into a buttery, smooth steak was a godsend in those times. The fact that it didn't need a lot of work on the side to make it shine also meant that it was something the populace could really jibe with, and slow cooker meant that you could braise away without worry. It wasn't one of the most popular steaks ever, and of course, if you were working with recipes that were centered around making better cuts of meat shine, you'd probably get a more decent steak experience, but it was a homely meal to have after a tough shift or a day spent taking care of the kids. Can anyone ask for more relief? Especially when cooking, it became a non-issue later on. Bean soup is different from the other soups on our list because, in contrast, bean soup was pretty simple to make. Dried red kidney beans in a thick soup made for a favorite of states like Idaho, where the dish originated from. You could find different ideas on the soup from house to house, as some had their vegetables as toppings and others had meats. Fred Dubois, who was Idaho's senator at one point, passed a bill that mandated the Senate restaurant to have bean soup on the menu every day. Definitely one way to start a movement if you ask us, but the trend definitely stuck around after it gained steam. It was an amazing way for low-income neighborhoods to eat healthy, but nowadays you would not find it in households as beans are not really the go-to item for soups. Now, this is one meaty dish. Well, it doesn't take rocket science to know why this one has vanished from our tables. I bet you're not up to the task of hunting a bear, are you? Elk roast was all the rage for Native American tribes. Elk is native to North America and parts of Asia, and people have relied on it as a food source for centuries. You know, back when cattle weren't common in the States. This roast was a favorite in regions where elk was abundant, and its sacred recipe was passed down from generation to generation. So, why was it such a hit back in the day? Well, apart from the tribe's sacred connections to the animal which made it a favorite, it was pretty easy to make too. It was often slow-cooked over hot coals. Think of it as modern-day barbecue, just without all the fancy grills and tools. Canned vegetables were the silent workers of Granny's kitchen. Those beautiful inventions offered the hint of a summer in Granny's pantry, although it was buried in snow. Think for a moment that you entered her kitchen and saw those shiny jars standing as soldiers, always giving you the taste of comfort in your mouth. Canning the vegetables wasn't just about preserving the harvest. It was, to a certain extent, a survival technique in a world where a grocery store was not a day's ride away. For the green beans or the tomatoes, for instance, Grandma would always ensure that she picked the freshest from her farm and prepared them in the most appropriate way. If they are your favorite vegetables or fruits, it's like preserving them in time. If you close the lid well, you are going to be eating the produce of the summer, even in winter. Did you know that the art of canning dates back to the early 19th century? It was developed as a means through which people could acquire food during wartime. Boy, that operation was something like a military strategy. And now, we can enjoy that same convenience in our homes. Canned veggies are perfect for making soups, casseroles, and even as a side dish. No cooking required. Simply heat the meal and you're set to start your delicious eating spree. Cowboy stew is a really romantic dish. It's something right out of the actual American West. And cowboys did genuinely make this dish so much they forever stuck the label onto it too. What is it? It's a stew. A cowboy stew. What does that really mean though? Well, as is pretty characteristic of cowboys and their lifestyle, it means going with the flow and using whatever you have next to you to the best of your ability. Cowboy stew wasn't something that only cowboys ate back then, though. It was a substantial meal even for churches. Know why? Because it took almost nothing to make it, and the dish had this rustic, make-do charm to it that really put you in what the kids today would call the grind set. Why would a dish do that? Picture yourself in their shoes. You're a middle-class worker in the 1960s, and things are getting rough with money again. It's not like financial security is a year-round, 24/7 concept, right? You use what you can because tomorrow you know you have to go back to work. You get a bare-bones stew that pulls together some respectable flavor for the amount of ingredients and the quality it's working with, and it kind of brightens your day, puts some energy back into you, and lets you go tackle on another shift. It caught on, really. Potato pancakes are one that we are very sad to have seen fade away from the arsenal of home chefs. Pancakes made with matzo or applesauce topped with garlic or fried onions made for such a mouth-watering meal. Low-income households back in those times were struggling to buy produce. Farmers' markets were uniformly unaffordable for middle-income households due to creeping inflation. People needed a vegetable that was cost-appropriate and easy to make in batches. Enter the potato pancake, which revolutionized the breakfast scene in a struggling time. As times improved, people slowly started going to more fancier and creative breakfasts, unfortunately leaving simpler dishes behind. Potato pancakes took a backseat in the face of changing food and economic trends, but anyone from the era will rave to you about the godsend these were. If you think the beef heart is off limits for cuisine, you're wrong, because stuffed hearts were once a celebrated dish. This dish sounds like something out of a horror movie, but it was actually quite common. Think of the beef heart cleaned, stuffed with a mixture of breadcrumbs, herbs, and often pine nuts or raisins, and then roasted or braised. Sounds appetizing yet? This economical and tasty meal was a testament to the nose-to-tail philosophy of cooking, where no part of the animal was wasted. In Europe, the practice of stuffing animal hearts dates back to medieval times. It was a popular dish amongst the working class in England, while it was reserved for the elite in France. Homemade pickles. No self-respecting grandma would let a crop of cucumbers go to waste. Enter homemade pickles. Pickles aren't just a way to add zing to a sandwich. They are a way to maintain all of the garden's hard work. When the cucumbers roll up too fast for you to eat, you pickle them, and it's so easy. But pickles aren't just limited to cucumbers, carrots, onions, even nuts can be salted. Ready to be a delicious and crunchy side dish in almost any meal. Pickles have a fun history too. It dates back thousands of years to ancient Mesopotamia. But in Grandma's time, it was all about jars and secret salt recipes passed down from generation to generation. Some pickles are sweet, some types have a sour taste, and some packed a punch that would bring tears to your eyes. It is a science and an art, and Grandma has perfected the pickling process. The best part? Pickles will last forever. Okay? Maybe not forever, but it's close enough. If stored properly, it can be stored for months or even years, ready to add deliciousness to any meal. If you enjoyed this video, let us know your favorite cooking trick in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.